I used my last $1,000 in my bank account to start that nonprofit. And by the end of the year, I had made it back 10 times. Within a couple weeks, I started getting emails about, oh, we want to give you this award. I'm like, award for what?
Samantha Lawson, AKA Sam Law.
I couldn't believe it. They gave me an award for being Entrepreneur of the Year. From literally crying a few months prior, God saw me.
How old were you when you had your first child?
I was 16 when I had my daughter.
All right, I want to stop and I want to pause and I want to talk about that.
Please don't make me do that. Oh, sorry, I've never actually told that story to anyone. And
wow. I myself got emotional because it's our deepest, darkest secrets, and there are no secrets on the Real Mentors podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Real Mentors podcast. Real, as always, stands for Real Examples Altering Lives. I am your host, Sean Martin, and today I'm honored and privileged to have with me an entrepreneur, a mother, and a difference maker, Long Island native, Samantha Lawson, AKA Sam Law. Welcome to the show, Sam.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you for making the trek out here to the Bronx today. Wanted to just thank Demisha Owens for making the introductions to you and letting me know that you'd be a perfect guest for our show. As an entrepreneur, I wanted to focus on that journey because this show is all about mentorship and how people like yourself who have taken a chance on themselves, who have, made the mistakes, gone through the dirt, and gone through the journey to come out the other side better off for it. How did that journey look? Because unfortunately, a lot of our young generation, they are seeing the result of the hard work. They're seeing the highlights on social media, but they're not seeing what goes into it. And it's often said that an overnight success is what you're seeing the product of 10 years of hard work, become.
Right.
So I wanted to focus on your journey as an entrepreneur. You are now the owner and operator of Home Healthcare Service. Tell us a little bit about that and how you got into that space.
So I want to say I agree. It usually is like the entrepreneurship journey usually is like this long view that no one saw. They're looking at it like right up front at the moment, but they don't see all the steps. So I'm gonna take it back before we even get into what I do. So I got my master's in mental health counseling. It was a plan B situation. I had originally went to law school after I graduated college at Louisiana State University. And I hated living in the South. I mean, I hated it. I liked the food though. Right. I liked the football, but and I don't really love football, but they made it fun. But I was just like, you know what? I got to get out of here. And unfortunately, my grades weren't high enough to transfer back to a school in New York. So I dropped out. Like I cried about it. And I called I told my parents over winter break, I'm coming home. I'm not staying there. I can't do it. And the next month I went back and we packed my stuff up and I came home. And I was like, man, what the heck am I going to do? I got a job right away in sales, actually virtual sales before it really was a thing at a PC Richard & Son. And at that time, I was like, all right, I'm bored. I need to go back to school. So I applied for a master's in mental health counseling at CW Post. And that literally was always plan B. I had remember speaking to a professor that I admired. His name was Dr. Norman at Old Westbury. Shout out to him, wherever he is. And he was like, why would you do that? Just go to law school. And I was like, all right. But I kept that plan B in my pocket. And I just realized the pun. Ladies, keep a plan B in your pocket.
That's where I do this right here. No comment, but you heard it here first.
So, I enrolled, I applied to CW Post. I reached out to some professors that I had in my bachelor's is in psych, and they all wrote me a letter, great sterling letters. I did my interview. Next thing you know, I'm a student at Post in the master's in mental health. I graduated with honors. I was in the honor society. I I guess I would have been a magna cum laude. I graduated with over 3.8 GPA.
Nice.
And then but in that time, I went and I was doing counseling because you had to intern for almost 2 years in the program.
Right.
And I was like, I don't like this. I was like, this isn't fun. But to be fair, there was a sad aspect because a lot of the people that I was working with, my particular population, they were, you'd talk to them one day and then they were gone the next because they had overdosed. So I was working with people that were dealing with drugs and alcohol addiction, mostly during the peak of the heroin epidemic.
This is
so like around 2015, 2016. Right, so
you're talking about the opioid epidemic.
Yes.
Okay. So you're seeing all these.
Yeah, I'm seeing young people, older people, like we're doing interventions with them and then the next day they're gone.
Wow. That's got to take a toll on you too.
Yeah. And I was just like, and then unfortunately in that time, right after I graduate, within a month, my dad passes, less than a month. So I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this. And I went into something fun. During that time while I was wrapping up school, I worked during school. I worked in sales still. And I switched to marketing in the alcohol industry. And I started out as a brand ambassador. You would catch me at every bar and restaurant on Long Island saying, hey, do you want to try this drink? You want to try that drink? And I moved up real quick. So for about 10 years almost, I spent working in that field. I became a regional manager on Long Island for a brand. I was like, all right. But in that time of that journey, I was slowly picking up entrepreneurship skills. I had to command my own territory.
I think what I'm hearing too is sales.
Yes.
And I have always been a proponent of, if you want to be an entrepreneur, even if you're scared to death, even if you have no clue, which I'm also hearing from your story, you kind of just figuring what you don't like and is leading you to the things that you do.
Correct.
And sales is the fastest way to find out what you're made of.
Absolutely.
There may be a base salary or whatever, but there's a limited safety net because it's also based on your performance.
Yes.
So you've got to be able to perform. And if you don't perform, you don't make the extra money that's going to take you to, the financial wins that you want. So,
exactly.
And you also hear no a lot. And that prepares you for the real world because I want to take it back to your education.
Mm-hmm.
So you failed early and often.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Which is another hallmark of successful entrepreneurship that people often get confused. They see the wins, but in order to get to the wins, there's got to be learning lessons.
Oh,
AKA,
yeah.
You can frame it as losses or you can frame it as such. So what is the shift in your mind when you drop out of college and you come back home and then you fast forwarded to master's, but what went on in between? Where did you finish up your bachelor's before you moved on to the master's?
So I finished up my bachelor's at SUNY Westbury. Go Panthers. It was in psychology. I graduated with a pretty solid GPA. I was active in my class. Like I was a teen mom too. I had a baby while I was getting my bachelor's. I had another child while I was getting my bachelor's.
How she forgets about that, I don't know.
I am so, that's been my life.
How old were you when you had your first child?
I was 16 when I had my daughter.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. I want to stop and I want to pause and I want to talk about that. And the reason is because there may be a young woman out there that is faced with the same exact problem.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we normalize it, or that was just your life and you accepted it and you moved on. But what did that look like at 16, finding out you're pregnant? What's going on with you first? And what's going on with the people that love you in the house? What are they telling you? Are they supportive? Are they putting you down? What's going on?
So I grew up in a multi-ethnic Christian, traditional Pentecostal Christian family. And at that time, this is the time when Teen Mom is actually getting ready to roll out. So
on MTV.
Yes. So Teen Mom kind of normalized teen pregnancy or made more people like accepting of the level of support that's really needed for it, to actually get the mom and the children in a great space. And, my family, they weren't proud of that moment. They weren't happy with that moment. I was shunned in some aspects. Some of my friends' parents didn't let them hang out with me anymore. So it was a very lonely time. And it was a time where I had to be like, all right, well, this is who I am. I'm Samantha. Yeah, I'm a I don't want to say straight A student, but mostly A student. Yeah, I'm in the dance team. Yeah, I do this. Yeah, I do that. And I work and all that. But I'm also a mommy, and I have this little person that I got to take care of. Now, my family knew that. My mom was a young mom, and they supported me, but it wasn't like a lot of verbal love and support. It was like, all right, we know that this is the situation. We're going to do what we have to do to make sure you guys are all right.
Not to jump to conclusions, but I'm sure, the word shame
yes,
is something that we all live with.
Yes.
It's our deepest, darkest secrets. And there are no secrets on the Real Mentors podcast. So at the end of the day, I want to rewind and really focus on this because I think there's a lot of power and value in this story. And I didn't know about this story until now, but I did hear that your oldest is 21 and you look young, and I'm like, I'm doing the math in my head, but you never ask a woman their age, right? So you're 16, you're pregnant, you come from a family with, a strong religious 15.
Yeah.
So you come from a family with a strong religious background. I'm sure that there's some shame there on your part and on their part. Let's talk about how you, as a student and someone who was already, I'm guessing, expected to do big things in the family.
Oh, yeah.
How does that affect you as a young woman? Like, what are you thinking?
Well, they were trying to force me to get married because that's what Christians do. And I cried to my mother and my father in that moment with my daughter's father and his mother sitting right there. And I said, please don't make me do that. Right. Please do not make me get married. I have dreams. I promise I'll go to college. I promise I'm going to tear up. I promise that I will be somebody. Please don't make me do that. And they agreed, and I followed through on my word. Sorry, I've never actually told that story to anyone. And, that was a very deep thing to say at 15 and not knowing what the rest of your life looks like. I was just like, please don't make me do that. And I'm glad that they heard me. I'm glad that they didn't do that. I'm glad that I lived up to what I said I would do in one way or another. And there was a lot of shame. When I found out I was pregnant, I was in a Catholic school. I was at St. John the Baptist. St. John said I could stay. I said, absolutely not. I'm not going to stay in Catholic school and be pregnant. I'm going back to my district. I'm going back to West Babylon. So they kept me in homeschool that first year. I went back in the middle of 11th grade after I had her. I had her a week after I turned 16. So that was my sweet 16, was giving birth. And I finished up high school on time and graduated with 88 GPA or something like that. Wow. I went to college. I went to Old Westbury. College wasn't smooth. I went to Old Westbury. I went to Stony Brook, came back to Old Westbury. But I did some cool things. I studied abroad. Like, I was a freshman class secretary. I worked my butt off. I worked at the bookstore. I worked at the mall. I worked at like every mall on Long Island through my tenure in college, except for Americana. That was a little too bougie for me.
I've had the pleasure of being able to afford to shop there, and I still don't like shopping there.
I don't go there.
I just feel pretentious being around those people.
It is a little bit. I've eaten lunch there, but that's about the end of it. It was a journey. So I knew how to fail forward.
Where do you get that resilience from? Who do you give credit to that for?
God. Honestly, I look at God. I look at Mary. Mary was 15 when she found out like she had this big call to carry, Jesus. And she was technically a single mom. Joseph that's not his biological son in the story. And so you don't think that all those years ago they shamed her knowing that she was pregnant at 15. Like no one knows who the dad is. And she's like, this is my purpose. I'm going to do what I have to do. And she had to birth this huge purpose that transformed the world in one way or another, whether you think it's good, bad, or you don't believe it at all. It's such a heavy influence that she had. that was the story I looked to, ironically enough. And Joseph was a very big story that I would read over and over again, because God gave him a vision of himself that he was going to do great things. And he finds himself in a prison for years. And he's like, hey, I'm doing great. I'm going to do great things. But God gave him favor along the way in every aspect, every time he failed forward. And so he had the ultimate favor and was a leader. And he was the leader of Egypt. So those are like two things that I look to. And, you know, my family, just like things that they had gone through and persevered through. I saw them get through hurdles. I seen my mom get through hurdles. Like I said, she was a young mom before she married my dad and had me. And it inspired me to keep going. Like I said, fall forward.
Wow. I myself got emotional because, you know, I'm very unfamiliar with the stories of the Bible. I know that one, obviously. But for me, I've always had faith. I've always had belief. I've always known I was meant for greater things, as I often say, but I have no clue how I'm going to get there. And I really didn't have stories or role models or examples to draw from. It seems that faith is a huge part of your life. It has been since early on. And that gave you the strength to get through your own trials and tribulations. Who were your early mentors that you can point to for the work ethic? Because you were not an overachiever, but you've done well for yourself. Even at a young age, you knew how to put in the work. Where'd you learn that?
Honestly, I watched a lot of television.
All right, hold on. Watch TV, kids.
This is really weird, but like I was like obsessed with like Barbara Walters. I was obsessed with like women on television that just looked powerful. They had their suits and they were always killing it, and somebody was always talking about them and saying, oh, she's this, she's that. You know, I looked up to like Oprah. I looked up to the news anchors. Like, I just thought they were so cool. Like, I would watch like different lawyers and I'd be like, how did they get there? How did these people get there? So a lot of it was like watching. I looked up to journalists, to be honest with you. You know, in my family, probably one of the key figures that I really looked up to was my grandfather. He had a really rare disease called syringomyelia, which left him being basically a paraplegic. He couldn't use his arms or legs at some point, you know, when I was growing up. And I would stay after school and watch him. Like, I would sit with him after school almost every day until he passed on. And from like when I was like 10 years old, I'd go over after school, I'd sit with him, you know, while my grandma ran a quick errand here or there. So for about 2-3 hours, I'd do my homework and he'd tell me stories. And this man was amazing. He was an architect. He could build a building, but he couldn't use his hands. So he'd have to tell somebody how to do it. I really admired that he couldn't physically do things, but he still got it done.
Right. So he didn't let that paralysis or, you know, status as a paraplegic affect his mind or his vision or his drive, it seems. So you're picking up lessons from not only failing forward, but the people around you. You finish up college, you're going to go back to master's and you move on to different professions, as we talked about off camera. And I just wanted to kind of reiterate the fact to anybody who's listening out there that you're going to find out who you're not quicker than who you are. Mm-hmm. So try as many different things as you can, fail forward, but just try. Just do something, do anything. Because at the end of the day, if it works, you know you're good at it. And if it doesn't, and you don't quit, you're going to move on to something else. You mentioned journalists being a big part of this vision you created for your own future. And you now have your own podcast too. Tell us a little bit about that.
My boyfriend, I have to talk about him all the time.
And she blushes when she talks about him, so that's a good thing. He's doing something right.
Yeah, he was an entertainer. He raps and stuff, and he had a podcast. And he kept trying to convince me that a podcast was a good idea. And I'd heard this before. Like, other people had told me, Sam, you should do a podcast. You should do a show. You should do a show. And I was like, I don't want to do a show. So one day, we're in New York City. We went to the Dorian Gray restaurant. I know it's not the Dorian Gray restaurant. It's really the author of Dorian Gray, whose name escapes me. But we go to the restaurant that's modeled after his his stories. And this is like right after DMX had passed. So everybody's playing DMX all throughout the city. And like, I grew up on that. I grew up listening to Rough Riders, you know, and rest in peace, my man. And he's like convincing me, he's like, Sam, you love politics, you love people, you love advocacy, you love fashion, like you know, you model, you do this. I didn't mention that I model, but I model. I do make money modeling. I have since I was about 4 years old off and on, and it's really picked up after my dad passed, which is weird. He was like, why, if you were on a show, you can do all of that in one. So he appealed to my laziness. And I can't lie to you. I always say that if a person is lazy and smart, they're good to have on your team because they know how to do something in a very effective way. Like they know how to get things done easy, quick, and well, because they don't want to do a whole bunch of stuff to get to the point. So when he said that, it appealed to that side of me. And I was like, all right, I'll try it. So he took me to a studio. We met with the studio owner. And for 3 seasons, I have shot That Sam Law Show. We're actually getting ready to go into our fourth season. Next year, normally we would have done it this year, but I had a baby and had some things I had to do. And we're also going to pivot into another concept with my show's brand. So I'm looking forward to continuing that, doing those things. And we talked to a lot of Long Island business owners that are ready to work with or just tell their story to empower, you know, the millennials to keep going. Because I think one thing about our generation is we're in the middle of so many things that sometimes we kind of get lost. We lose direction about how to stay on track, because we can still own a house. We can still have businesses. You can still have all the things, or at least try all the things and see what works for you. And like Sean said, find out who you aren't so you can learn who you are.
It's never too late to step into that thing that you're going to excel at. I'm 46 and I'm finally just finding my true purpose in the world. So it's never too late to find that thing. And the podcast may be the catalyst that takes your personal brand to the next level. So I implore anybody out there who's building a personal brand to do just that. Podcast, Reels, Instagram. You don't have to do high level edits like you see on my page. That's something pretty unique. What you have to do is be comfortable getting in front of the camera and just put yourself out there. Let your potential audience get to know you. And there's no better way to do that than social media and having a podcast. But make sure you subscribe to the Real Mentors podcast as your number one podcast. So you find this job with the liquor companies. Mm-hmm. You're starting to excel. You're leveling up. You're moving up the ranks. But at some point, when do you feel this call or this itch, or what happens in your world to move you from employee and marketing sales to becoming an entrepreneur?
So just before the pandemic hit, I had started getting really involved in charity work. And I had started with a company called Boom Cups. While one of my friends that I worked with in marketing, she connected me to them. And we were doing these charity basketball events, and we were just getting involved. And I met a lot of other young people that were in entertainment. And it's a little weird, but I had asked God one day, like, God, show me other Christians in entertainment, because I like entertainment. I like these other fields. Like, show me some other Christians. So I go to this event. One of the pastors from a big church brings Justin Bieber, because he was like Justin Bieber's mentor at the time. So like we're all kicking it, we're all talking and everything. And I was like, okay, God, like this was really direct. It was actually Hillsong, Pastor Cardboard, Justin Bieber. And I was like, wow, that's like a direct hit. And a lot of these young people that were involved they were involved at Hillsong or involved in other big churches throughout, you know, New York and New York City. And I was like, all right. And I just got more involved in charity work until the point where I was like, well, I have a need in my community. I was living in Wyandanch at the time. There wasn't a lot of like, millennials doing what I was doing. There was a couple, and there were some that were starting to rise. And I was like, all right, well, let me focus here and do what we've been doing, and do it in a smaller venue. And So I started a nonprofit organization, and I had to. It wasn't even so much that I wanted to. I wanted to do something, and the government told me I couldn't because I wasn't a nonprofit. So I was like, well, I never want to hear that again. I don't ever want someone to tell me I can't do something because I don't have something. So I went and became a nonprofit. And
what does that process look like?
Well, I'm gonna be honest with you. I was super broke at the time. I had gotten injured in a car accident going to work one day. And because it was in the line of work, it was a workers' comp case. So that was the craziest time. That was also, workers' comp means you're losing some of your income. Right. It got to the point where I lost all of my income because it turned out I wasn't gonna recover as quick as everyone thought. And I used my last $1,000 in my bank account to start that nonprofit. And by the end of the year, I had made it, back 10 times, which was great. I was able to give and give and give and give and give and do and do and do. And I'm really proud of that. And in that time, someone says, you also you can't just have a nonprofit. You also have to have a consulting business. So I said, okay. So I was like, well, what skills do I have that I can use and offer up? And I realized I'm really good with computers. I always have been. I've always been highly tech savvy. My diploma, oddly enough, does not say mental health counseling. It says information technology because that was the school my program was in at Post. So I was able to get in certain doors with that. And I started doing a lot of work, editing, building websites, creating flyers, things of that nature, reels. Like I was doing that for businesses on the side. And then eventually I get better. The pandemic hits, things go crazy. The liquor companies, they kind of shut down doing field work. And
I was going to say, they thrived, but they didn't have the in-person because you just couldn't be out in the field. But they sold more liquor
in history,
during
their history.
8 or 9 months. It was essential for us to get twisted during the pandemic.
Yeah. And so when we come back to things the next year, 2021, I get promoted at this company I've been at for a long time. Like through that journey, I think I had been there for like 6 years at that point. And I worked for them as a regional manager for Long Island, and I'm having a great time. And then eventually that ends. And I was like, all right, what am I going to do? So my boyfriend suggests going into another field. Like, what else are you good at? What else are you doing? Why don't you try this? So I was like, all right, he had been in home health care for a long time. And he had started his own business. It blew up quickly. And I was like, well, yeah, you do that. I don't know how to do that. He was like, well, why don't you see what you know how to do? So I saw that there was this aspect called service coordination. I met all the requirements. I had already had my business formation. I had already had my, an S Corp. I was already ready to go. And I think that journey, even though we took a long way around to get to this point, I had the degree to do it. I had the business formation to do it. I had the wherewithal from sales to go talk to people and sell my business because I have clients that have to choose me. I knew how to manage a team and get them to do what I needed them to do when they couldn't see me and I couldn't see them. And all of those skills. And I had the psychology to be able to talk to a family that had a loved one who just had a brain injury, or their loved one has Alzheimer's, dementia, doesn't recognize them anymore. And they're just like, I don't even know what to do because my heart's breaking here, but they still need my help. And understanding the law, because I went to law school and I had a knack for understanding the law and interpreting it. And all of those things combined to what I was able to do over the last, now we're going into our second year, and the growth. Like I had speedy growth. I have some friends that are in the program and they're like, I'm not growing fast enough. And I'm like already at over 20 clients. I'm already on track to make almost $300,000 in the next year. So it's just like, whoa, like that, all of that led to this. And the last year I had a baby, y'all, another baby number 3, right? I like making babies, I guess. And the crazy thing is that period was tough. But now I didn't even talk about that year. There's a 2-year window from when I lose my job to I start this business. And I'm pregnant again. I'm finding myself in this place again where I'm not making that much money. Shout out to Demisha. She gave me a job at EAC. I was a counselor there for a while for the young people. And that was tough. It wasn't as tough as the counseling I was doing before, but it was tough. There was some tough stories. But there was also like some more. It was virtual, but I got to meet a lot of my clients at some point, and just I knew like the way they ran up to me. When a youth values you, they approach you and like they'll tell you like in a way, one way or another, like, I'm so happy to meet you. I'm like, it was just, that was a great feeling. That was towards like the end of my tenure there. But financially, it sucked. I can't lie to you. Nothing against them, but it wasn't like the money I was making prior, and it wasn't the money I needed. But thankfully, my partner held me down. I was still building websites and stuff for people on the side, so I made it through that transition period before the money started to flow. It was tough. Like, it was hard. There was a lot of tears. I went into debt. That's tough. Going into debt and trying to get out of it. I'm not talking about student loan debt, because Lord, I don't even look at that. But like credit card debt, worrying about those things, loans. I had a nice car. I have a really nice car, and I still got to pay it because I need to get around. Oh my gosh, how am I gonna get out of this? But because I was prepared, it wasn't about, am I ever going to get out of this? It really was when, and when was slowly coming. So I gotta say, I'm grateful for the journey because it prepared me to be here today. And oddly enough, right after I had the baby, like literally, within a couple weeks, I start getting emails about, oh, we want to give you this award. I'm like, award for what?
For being awesome.
I was like, what? I thought it was a joke. I thought it was a spam mail. And actually, it was the National Association of Negro Professional Businesswomen, Inc. They gave me an award for being Entrepreneur of the Year.
Wow.
I couldn't even believe it. I got an award from my church for being a catalyst of change. And I had one prior, Newsday had named me during the pandemic, one of Long Island's top social activists. So like I had little things. I was the rising star of the 15th Legislative District. That's where like Wyandanch and Town of Babylon is, by our county legislator, Jason Richburg. So I had little like here and there, but this was crazy. I'm receiving the award in about a week or so, 40 Under 40 for Long Island Business News and Long Island Power Women from Schnepp's Media. So I couldn't believe it. I also got inducted into Forbes Black, and I'm also a member of the National Association of Negro Professional Women now. So within that year, as I'm building, and like just from literally crying a few months prior, like I don't know how I'm gonna get through this. Like God saw me. It brings me back to that story of Joseph. And one of the critical things about the story of Joseph is, he gets put in these high positions. He's working as like the head guy at Potiphar's house, who's like really close to Pharaoh. And then he gets knocked off his high horse. He gets put in jail. Even before that, his brothers actually are the reason he gets sold into slavery to even be working at Potiphar's house. But he gets thrown into jail, and people are having these dreams and visions, and he interprets them. And one person he interprets the vision is going to be a death for them. And the other, he interprets their vision is going to be restoration and promotion. And he tells them, and he says, when these things come true, don't forget me. Remember me, he says to these two men in prison. And eventually Pharaoh has this dream that vexes his soul and vexes him. And nobody can figure out the tarot cards, the astrologers. Nobody can figure out his dream. And finally, one of the guys that's elevated, I believe it's the chief butler, he goes, oh, there was a dude in prison that interpreted my dream. He said, the other guy was going to die and I was going to get promoted. And you know what, that happened. And Pharaoh's like, bring him here right now, and he brings him, and Joseph tells him this is going to happen. And not only did he tell him what was going to happen, which was that Egypt was going to go through 7 years of famine and 7 years of plenty. He said he came up with a plan. God gave him the plan to survive the 7 years of famine with the 7 years of plenty. And they were able to make it out, and he restored his relationship with his family. And you know, I sit back and I think about that last award ceremony that I went to, the one earlier in the year. My grandma was there, my older brother, my aunt, my mom. I believe my dad was there, you know, in spirit. And you know, the next award, I was able to take my 13-year-old son and my mom, my boyfriend there at these ceremonies. And it's just like that restoration of family, because I did talk about how there was a certain level of shame, and I was able to show my family, no, I promised you, if you didn't make me do this thing, not that marriage is a punishment, but at 15, it can change things about your life, you know? And, you know, it is a blessing at the right time with the right person, but that wasn't my person and that wasn't the right time. I kept my promise. I kept my word. And I remember when my grandfather passed, I was 12 years old and I gave a speech and I said to my family at that time, you know, my grandfather, he empowered me. And I know I'm the oldest female cousin and you guys are going to have to look up to me. And I promise you that I'm going to be somebody that you can look up to. I promise you I'm going to live out what he was to me. And, you know, I've watched my younger cousins go through. I've watched my siblings go through, and I've watched them get out of situations that would break people. And they've leaned on me and they've come to me and they've asked me for advice. They asked me for help, and I'm able to guide them because I've gone through it. I've been there. Even if I don't know what you went through personally, I just know that I'm there for you, to listen, to hug you, to hold you, whatever you need, offer you a drink, because I do know how to mix a good one, you know, whatever it is, and get you through that time so you can persevere, you can get through it. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I was able to fulfill that promise that I made to my parents.
I think before you made that promise to your parents, you made it to yourself.
Yes.
This is the culmination of that promise to yourself. I think people often overlook the fact that we break the promises to ourselves. We say them in our heads and we don't keep them. Mm-hmm. And when we don't keep them, we start believing less and less in ourselves to keep our promises.
Yes.
So who are we to make promises external to others after we can't even make them to ourselves? And what that does is it starts to erode your own self-belief.
Right.
And I think at an early age, you were blessed enough to be challenged with being pregnant, something that would have buried some people, mm-hmm. but yet seemed to be, your faith is your foundation. But that, to me, sticks out as the catalyst mm-hmm. for now what the next, 21 years of your life has been. And it hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows. And at times it seemed like you were pretty clueless as to what it was that you were going to be, but you found out a lot of things that you weren't going to be.
Right.
And it's exciting because sometimes I like not doing too much homework on my guests. I trust Demisha's judgment, and she says you should have Sam on the show, and you graciously accept it. And I'm getting to know you now, and more beautifully, our audience is getting to know you now. And I think your pain truly has been your power, like so many young women and men out there, but particularly as a woman of color who's been faced with challenges that so many of our people do face. You came out the other side better off for it. When you were starting your nonprofit, you touched on some of the pitfalls. What are some of the mistakes that you made that you would tell somebody looking to start their own nonprofit or community organization so they can avoid those same mistakes?
One of the things I have to say is, as far as formation goes, I was blessed to already be connected with people that had done it already. I knew that it was typically supposed to take a long time, so I did go the easy route, and it's literally easy. So when you form a nonprofit, if you know you're not a money focused mission, you can actually start with the easy form. You can only make a certain amount over like a 3-year period. There isn't really much on what happens after that, and you can only have, I think, don't quote me on this, but you can only have a certain amount of like assets. It's under $500,000, but there is a specific number. So go do your research. Don't just take my word for it. Making sure that I was legally able to collect funds and donations and things of that matter, because some people start taking money and you legally, you can't. In like New York State, like you have to go and file certain paperwork. It's quick. that form is like cheap. It's $25. So one of the biggest mistakes was probably using my last $1,000 because a girl was hungry. And I would say probably one of my biggest things that I did, there was a point where I just was like over it. And I was just like, why am I doing this? Having a good team was probably the biggest mistake that I made. I didn't have a good team. You know, I had some people that were there and they were in and out, and not because they were bad. They just had stuff to do. They had their own life, their own missions, their own things. You know, they were going through their own stuff. You want to really focus on having a good, solid board that's influential, that knows how to make deals, break deals. They can shake things up. You know, they're well versed on what it takes to bring money into the nonprofit, or even just be creative and have new ideas, connections. Because there's a lot of things that, you know, a lot of times it's exchanging a fish for a piece of bread in the nonprofit. It's not necessarily money. Sometimes you're exchanging services. Sometimes you're exchanging locations. Like, it's a lot of, like, your friends are, or your friends in that game are really critical who you're partnered with. So I think that was key. And knowing when, sometimes, like, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run. And I think during the pandemic, I had the pleasure of talking to Dane Cook on Clubhouse. He is one of my favorite comedians. I actually still have this recording somewhere, I think. And I asked, like, he was talking about how he stepped away from comedy, because he stepped away from comedy for years, you know, for many different reasons. And he had some things with his family. And, you know, he just was kind of like in a state where I don't really want to do this right now, or I'm not going to do this right now. And I asked him, I said, you know, what should I do in this situation? And he was like, stop for a while, take some time to yourself, regroup, fall in love with yourself. Like, think about what you need to do, what you want to do, and then use that as the power to go back to it, or you don't have to go back to it. So, you know, in May of this year, we changed our mission to focusing on minority healthcare leadership, because working in healthcare, I learned that there's not a lot of support for minority healthcare leaders. There are things that we face in diversity, equity, and inclusion that other groups don't face. They have more connections. They know about more agencies to help them get off the ground. We really are getting it from the mud. And without those friendships, those relationships, those connections, you know, it's hard. But we're starting that. We're building connections. We're having the right conversations with leaders in the nonprofit sector, leaders in the for-profit sector, and we're just kind of building from there.
That's awesome. I mean, people are your greatest resource, and you need the team. You need the team, period, point blank. The reason I'm on this mission right now, as we shared off camera, and some of you may know, is the fact that I wanted to start a nonprofit, and I immediately was turned off by the red tape and the politics and all the things that I consider to be stumbling and roadblocks for me. As an entrepreneur, as somebody who doesn't have any roadblocks other than myself and finances, depending on what I want to do, I was turned off by the whole thing. But I didn't give up on the mission. I just focused on what I was good at. And now I'm shining a light on the people that are doing the work in the community so that you don't have to make the same mistakes. And as Sam said, focus on getting the right team around you. You don't have to do everything yourself. There are plenty of nonprofits in any space, in any city, in any territory, that all you have to do is make a phone call or knock on the door, and they will gladly welcome you in and tell you what to avoid and what to do in order to move your mission forward. So people are always going to be your greatest resource. Don't think that you got to do it on your own. So thank you for shedding light on that as well. What advice can you give, if any, even though you've given some beautiful advice already, to someone who's facing that lack of belief in themselves? What would you tell them to lean into? And let's say they don't have the familial structure that you do. And you've seen that too through EAC. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the things that you told those young kids to have them come up to you and kind of let you know, hey, you made a difference in my life?
I want to go back to what you said about making promises to yourself, you know, especially when you don't feel family support, you don't feel like you have that structure. When you're a teen, I think there is this thing where you you kind of feel like you know everything. It's really weird. My senior thesis was on this. In high school, you have this belief that you're immortal. Like, you know you're not, but you know that you have more time than less time ahead of you for the most part. And that makes you take certain risks and that makes you try certain things. But it also comes with this mindset like, I know best. And the truth is, you probably don't. There's just no way. You don't have the experience. You don't have the time. You know a lot. You do have wisdom that you've garnered up until now. You have a lot of skills that you've garnered up until now, but there's so much more ahead of you. So make the promise to yourself that no matter what, you're going to achieve something. It doesn't have to be a bunch of awards. It doesn't have to be a ton of money, but something, whether it's having a better diet, making it to school every day. Some of my clients did not go to school, didn't make it to school every day. It was a challenge for them. And I understood that challenge because I was one of those same youth. I didn't make it as far as to be in that type of program. I don't even know if it existed then, but that was a big problem with me. I loved learning. I loved education, but I hated going to school because there was challenges I had to face. People weren't so nice, especially with me being a teen mom. They weren't so nice because I was mixed race. They just weren't so nice. And I hated actually going to school and dealing with other youth. So I understood that. And that made me feel alone. And you might feel alone at times. But remember, you're not alone. You're there. You are with you. You are speaking to you. Speak life into yourself. Day by day, step by step, brick by brick. Speak life into yourself. Read, watch empowering stories. J. Cole said Uncle Phil is the only father that I ever knew. He didn't have that influence in his world. He watched it through the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. If that's his truth in his song, he watched it through the Fresh Prince. So sometimes you have to pull your mentors, your inspiration from things you watch, podcasts you listen to. And that's all right. That just means somewhere in the world, we're all connected one way or another. We're all carbon. We all come from the earth. We're all stardust, whatever you believe, whatever you feel, but we're connected. So that person on TV, whether it's Sean here, it's Tony Robbins, it's Cardi B, whoever it is, when you feel a connection to that story, take it, run with it, use it. Use that power as a steam to inspire your dreams. I believe Kanye West said that, keep going. Just keep going, keep trying, keep speaking life into yourself. If you do have some family or friends that speak life into you, hold on to them. Know that they may only be there for a season. And when that season ends, it's okay. It's okay to move on. It's okay to move forward. Fall forward.
If I had a mic to drop, I would just do that. That was amazing. I just want to say thank you for sharing your story. I want to thank you for your courage. I want to thank you for your faith. And I want to thank you for the work that you've done up to this point. I cannot wait to see what the future holds for you.
Thank you so much.
Because I know it is only getting started. So I also want to just ask you to speak into the camera, let our audience know where they can find you, how they can find you, and how they can support your mission as you move forward on your journey.
You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. It's at that's THATS_Sam, SAMLAW. That's my email. I'll make sure to give it to you guys so you have it. It's my website. I'm around. You can find me. If you search Sam Law, you'll find me. There'll be me, all different shapes and sizes, but you'll find me. And I'm available. I try to keep my lines open to people.
Awesome. So I appreciate you coming in. Again, it's been such an honor and a pleasure to get to know you. To our audience, thank you as always for tuning in. We'll put Sam's information in the credits so you can find out more about her and support anything that she's doing. And also reach out to her if you need someone to lean on, because she shared so many things about her journey that I know that some of you are going through right now. So you are not unique in your struggles and you can overcome them too. But you've got to have faith and you've got to have belief. And then third, you've got to never quit on yourself. So as long as you keep falling forward, you will keep moving forward. Thank you as always for tuning in to the Real Mentors podcast. Let's get it.